Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. This week we're going to learn the Vayomer of Shabbos Pasha Shmini from 40 years ago, which gives us special energy and inspiration. And 40 years ago, in the year 5745, the Shabbos Shmini was Shabbos Mevorchim, just like it is this year, blessing the new month of Iyaar. The difference is that this year Rosh Chodesh is going to be on Monday and Tuesday. That year it was Sunday and Monday. So if I'm not and it was Sunday and Monday, and so therefore the Haftorah of Erev Rosh Chodesh, day before Rosh Chodesh, was read. We've already had some Amorim with this passage, and we're going to learn this Vayomer. This Vayomer talks about certain Kabbalistic concepts which are very interesting, and the Rebbe touches upon them to explain his point. And the Rebbe's point is, and of course, like as always, in how we should serve God, but it talks about some of the Kabbalistic things. We'll try to go over it at least to touch the point of it. Vayomer Lo Yehonasan Machar Chedesh v'nifkad Taki Pakid Meshavecham. So the Haftorah is, of course, in the book of Samuel 1, in chapter 20, the story of David and Jonathan Yehonasan, and when he was gauging to see what his relationship was with his father-in-law Shaul, the father of Yehonasan, who was his best friend. So Yehonasan told David, tomorrow is going to be Rosh Chodesh, and we see very interesting terminology here. And you will be remembered. We'll remember you. You'll be a topic of discussion, so to speak, because your seat will be empty, because he won't be attending the feast of Rosh Chodesh by the king. Now, the word v'nifkadata and the word yipoked have the same root, peikov dalet, and one means to remember, one means missing. So the irony here, and the Rebbe will also mention it. וידועים, דרוש רבי סיינו על פסוק זה, דרך דר. מדרוש, רבי נחזוק נתפס התורה, עם הגוי סביור, וביורי אדמורת צמח צדק, ועד דרוש יחק מחד מונה סדרנו. It's well known, the Mamorim of our Rebbes, the leaders on this pasuk, generation after generation, so beginning from the Alter Rebbe, which is his Vayomer is printed in the Ohr Torah, meaning transcribed by his grandson, the Tzemach Tzedek, with the Tzemach Tzedek's elucidations and explanations and notations, up until, through the Rebbe and through the Rebbe's Rebbe and father-in-law, the leader of the generation, they also mention the commentaries on this verse, that the idea of Yipoked Meshavecha, your seat will be empty, means that it's a terminology of lacking, missing, because the seat will be open. Indeed, like the verse states subsequently, and David's place, his seat, was empty. Therefore it becomes a topic, and therefore you'll be remembered. That's the idea of remembrance. Nevertheless, we have the same terminology, the same root in these terms, in the same verse, with the same ideas. One is the idea of remembering, and one is the idea of lacking. There's two opposites, right? Something is missing. It's not there. When you remember it, it's at the forefront of your awareness and cognizance. The verse could have said this a little differently, without this confusion. There are other discourses, chassidic discourses in this verse. Don't only explain this verse, but they explain also the subsequent verses, which are also part of the Haftorah of the Shabbos. Now, again, like I said, this year we're not going to be reading this Haftorah of the Shabbos. But this was from 40 years ago. And amongst those Mamorim, we also have the mimer of in the continuum of Mamorim of the Rebbe Maharash, which the Rebbe Maharash is the fourth Rebbe of his continuum, which begins with the word Vehechrim of 5631. And the Rebbe Maharash was the one, Baal Hayrod, the one who taught us that you have to go over the top in the first place, not only if you can't get there by going under. And the Rebbe adds, his birthday is on the second day of Iyar, which the Sfira then, and when we're counting of the Omer, and we go through all 49 Sfiras that night, it's Tiferes, Rebbe Tiferes, the Sfira of which is beauty, of course the combination of kindness and severity, Tiferes, Rebbe Tiferes. That year it was on Tuesday. This year it will be on Wednesday. And Tuesday is a day that God said regarding the third day of the week, the twice ki toiv, that it is good, and during creation. Hamizborach b'Shabbos, which is also blessed in the Shabbos. All the days are blessed. And part of this discourse was the mimer that we did last week of the Hechrim. The Rebbe also quoted from this mimer. So the Rebbe is saying all of this parenthetically. And now the Rebbe says V'sham, and there in this discourse of the Marash, now it's customary that around the birthday and or yortzeit of one of the Rebbeim, the Rebbe quoted more from the Torah, even though the Rebbe quotes, of course, from the Rebbeim all of the, quite often, of course. Excuse me. So, there the Mimer says, he continues the rest of the passages, in the subsequent passages. This is what Yehonasan told David. I will shoot 3 arrows. Is that the word you use for, with an arrow, you shoot an arrow, right? We use the word shooting. In Hebrew it's the same, shooting. So, and, no, not fling, shoot, yes. Then I will send the lad and I'll tell him, go find the arrows. And if I tell the lad that, behold, the arrows are from where you are and closer to here, it's peaceful to you. So you'll hear, David will know that the king is not, King Saul is not mad at him, and it'll be safe for him. And if you say like this to the lad, if I say to the lad, the arrows are from you and beyond, you have to know you can go because God has sent you, meaning it's not good for you to be there. So the Rebbe Marash explains regarding those verses, why specifically the bow and the arrow, why did Yehonasan say he's shooting 3 arrows? Why wouldn't it be enough to shoot 1 arrow or 2 arrows? Right? You could say, go get the arrow. It's from you and beyond, or you and towards here, or the 2 arrows. The Af Ba'alma, and even though simply it's just a symbol, a plain symbol, but nevertheless it's understood that it has a connection to the content of what the deeper message and lesson is to this whole story. Now, this goes in, the Rebbe taught us, and I believe based on what his father taught, and we see in his father's Torah, which of course, the fact that everything is significant, nothing is insignificant. So therefore, the Torah says there was 3 arrows, then 3 has a significance. Even though the Rebbe does acknowledge that, well, you think it's just a symbol, that's the way it was done, but everything is specific. And the Rebbe will explain the significance. Now, just a short introduction. We've talked about this in the past. The general idea, concept of a person serving God is refining the sparks that fell from Tohu. Tohu is at the beginning of creation where there's nothing organized, where everything is chaotic, and therefore it's not sustainable, and therefore it breaks, and everything has to become in an orderly fashion in order to have a creation that is sustainable. Meaning to say, the world of Tohu had all of the attributes and the characteristics, but it wasn't in the format. It was in a great revelation of godly light, and it didn't have. It wasn't able to be contained properly, and the vessels there at that point. And this is not only something in time and in stature, but it's on the way to getting something organized. It's first unorganized. So therefore, this is the idea of tohu. And that's the idea of gathering the sparks, because the sparks, when those vessels broke, and then we started the next world, the sparks fell down, so to speak. Because Tohu has an advantage that it had so much godly light, whereas Tikkun, when it's in an orderly fashion, as we've learned, then it's just as much as you can handle, so that no vessels break. But then it's missing that great thrust and shining of the light. So there's something special about that too, and therefore this is the union. So the Rebbe will talk about it here. So a person, generally speaking, is refining from the world of Tohu. That's the whole idea of our world, which is the world which is organized and established, the world of Tikkun. And the talking all about it, it's an is to fix, repair, refine the sparks that came out of the world of Tohu. So now we'll know why we're talking about a bow and arrows. Because the world of Tohu is far from Tikkun. In other words, there's a whole process of the chain of creation that comes between. And therefore the way we can affect it is specifically from far. That's the difference between a bow and arrow to lecherev, to a sword. When it's a battle with a sword, it's in close contact, right? The sword is attacking the one who's getting attacked. Whereas in a battle with a bow and arrow, the arrow is shot from far away. He says, I'm going to shoot off the arrows off to the side. That is specifically shooting to a distance. So then, this is a reference to what Jacob told Joseph, that I'm going to give you something which I took with my sword and my bow. Now, this, even serving God with the idea of the bow, there's also two levels. You have two. This weapon has two parts. It has the sword part, right? That's the arrow. The arrow has to be sharp. The arrow has to be able to attack, etc. And then there's the shooting part, which is the bow part. So there's the bow within the bow, that it should also affect the arrow. So now, the Rebbe doesn't explain this more here, but it's discussed. This idea that when you're affecting something from far, it has to be both what you're going to give and what it's and how you're going to give it. And the the root of this whole idea of refinement is the idea of what's called the seven original kings, which fell, so to speak, when the vessels were broken. This is a very Kabbalistic terminology. The kings here refer to, as the Rebbe will say, the seven characteristics, the seven attributes from chesed, kindness, through Malchus, but the Rebbe will explain it more at length. That there's the six first, and if you read in the portion of Vayishlach, it says these are the names of the kings that ruled before a king ruled for Israel in right Melech and Botzer and all those Salmon Masreka, right? All those in the end of the portion of Vayishlach. So that's a reference to this also, and that's Esav is involved with the chaotic idea of tohu, and Israel is the idea of tikkun, of organization. So these are the seven original kings. The first kadmon means the earlier ones, the first ones that fell. That's why it says in the verse that the seven kings died. It says Vayomos Bola Vayimlech Tachla Zerach B'Batzer. Right? It says that this one died, the next one ruled. This one died, the next one ruled. Each one of them was dying, and the next one was taking over. What is the significance of that? They had to die. It didn't say it. Then it was followed his reign. It was followed this one's reign, but it says he died. Somebody who falls down from his level is called one that died. A mace could mean a corpse. Mace could also mean one that died. It could be a verb, a noun. But the point is that it's death, associated with death. So these seven kings are the seven characteristics and attributes of Tehu, of that chaotic world. Omnum Ara Isbatal, that the earth can't exist, it can't subside, because everything is part of the chain of creation, and if those six attributes aren't there, then the lowest one, which is the earth, which is also Malchus, also can't exist, because that's the female of this male, so to speak, and therefore it's the seventh sphere, but it's also not going to be there. But because it dissipates on its own, because it's only what is it made up of? All the previous spheres, the first six. If they're not there, it's not there. It doesn't even have to die, so to speak. It just ceases. Therefore, in it was the diminishment. It's totally insignificant. But that we have to have Malchus. Malchus is the whole idea of creation. It's the one that accepts and then pervades, like the female. So it has to draw the seven midas. The seven attributes have to be in the Malchus. So it shouldn't be that the earth is totally nullified and non-existent. In order for it to be, you need everything. So this is the idea that on Rosh Chodesh we have to have what's called the building of Malchus, of the kingdom, so to speak. But it's different on Rosh Chodesh than on Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is how we do it, and that gives us the power to do it for the rest of the year, and the Rebbe will mention the differences. So the Rebbe Marash explains there that regarding what do you mean to build up the kingdom? How does that work? What is this about? There's two things. The way the kingdom is built on Rosh Hashanah, the way it's built every head of every month, Rosh Chodesh. And what's the difference between them? On Rosh Hashanah, the kingdom must be built, because before then it says, he just says it here briefly, but God sort of brings it back all within himself, and he rebuilds it every year on Rosh Hashanah, like we learned at that time. And therefore the whole kingdom and the Malchus has to be rebuilt from scratch, so to speak. But every month, subsequently, in the rest of the year, it's just revealing, it's revealing what was hidden. Before Rosh Chodesh, the kingdom, the Malchus, that sphere, the female sphere, is hidden. And with Rosh Chodesh, Pelim Shibegili. And in Rosh Chodesh, we affect that it should come out in the open. It should be revealed. That's the idea of the new moon. The new moon is not the moon is not visible, and then the new moon is when the moon is visible again. And the explanation is, let's explain there, as we know, Rosh Hashanah is when we build the kingdom, and like the sages say, say before me passages in the Torah that refer to God's dominion and kingship and reign, so that in order that you coronate me over you. That's when Israel draws down the crown of the kingdom. That is the whole idea of the fusion and the union of the Zeir Anpin, the six spheres of what's referred to Kabbalistically as this small face, the six spheres of Chesed, of kindness, etc., with Malchus, which is the female sphere, and it's also the union of the sun and the moon. But how does this union happen? In other words, how do we draw all this energy down? This comes from the even more supernal realm. As is known for any union of the Zoh and the Malchus, which would be like akin to the female and male and female. So there has to be something which is drawn down from a higher point, from a loftier level. That's why Rosh Hashanah we have to say, in order to draw it down, we say the verses that refer to God's dominion and how He remembers, and the shofar and Rosh Hashanah, as it's explained in the Maimer. That's one of the reasons that we say these verses to affect this drawing down of this energy of of this coronation and the union of all the spheres, etc. And the mashal that the Menachem brings there is it's like when somebody is having a discussion with somebody, says they're having a disagreement, and so he says, what I'm saying is right, even so and so says so. So in other words, what I'm saying is also is correct because it's known, and this was this person also says it like that. That's what we say in the prayer on Rosh Hashanah, like it says in your Torah. But the Torah is higher than these attributes and characteristics that are coming down to give us the energy, right? The Torah is higher, the Torah is higher than also these worlds, the world of chaos, and the world of organization. Gam Yochad, it's higher than everything. Rosh Hashanah, it's an actual putting it together, it's building it, it's creating it. Because before Rosh Hashanah, it's as if, like we say, the spheres dissipate, and therefore the earth dissipates, and there's nothing. So therefore, he starts again. But every Rosh Chodesh, it's just the idea of something being concealed and hidden and then revealed. Before the head of the month, before the new moon is seen, the moon is hidden and concealed. Rosh Chodesh is the revelation of the moon. In the simplest way, now when really we know that the moon is always there, it never goes away, just we can't see it, so it's there. But actually, it doesn't illuminate here on earth in a revealed sense. That's why we don't have to say these verses on Rosh Chodesh, because so to speak, it's already there. It just has to get uncovered. But since we have this idea that the earth, meaning Malchus, isn't there because the spheres aren't there, and therefore the Malchus is the sum of all its parts. So therefore, Habitul, the Gilui HaMalchus, which is the idea of the nullification and dissipation of the revelation of Malchus, which is really purveying the previous spheres. So, therefore, there has to be a particular task that will draw down the building of this kingdom again. So there should be a union of the sun and the sun and the moon in a revealed sense, they are revealed, and it's such a union that to the extent that we say that there will be one flesh. Like the original command, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Meaning to say that there will be results from all of these energies coming together. And this is the idea of you will be remembered. Why? Because your seed is empty. Because your seed is empty. The moon is missing before it's born, so to speak. And therefore we have to excuse me just a second. Sorry for the interruption here. Okay, so we have to have this whole dichotomy of that it's being you're missing, but you're remembered at the same time. This is the whole idea of, and I was going to say, this is also some of our struggle and the way we draw down energy, etc. So even if because your seed is open, because the moon is not visible. Because the moon is not visible, and but it's really there before it's born, so to speak. We have to bringing this down and affecting the energy of the Malchus, building the kingdom. And therefore, it has to be drawn down from this idea that you will be remembered. You will be brought there. You're really there, from the idea of being remembered. Now here, the Rebbe doesn't say it here, but that's also the idea of male and female. In Hebrew, we have the same root as to remember, zocher for male. Presence, so to speak. Sfiras HaKeser, which here it's referring to the attribute of Keser, the crown, and even higher, to the level which are higher than Toyu and Tikkun. And through this we are able to affect that we know that tomorrow, that's how the Haftarah starts, and Yohanan tells David tomorrow is going to be Rosh Chodesh, and all of the trimmings that come along with it, so to speak, everything that comes with it. The moon will be renewed. The sun is united with the moon. What does that mean in dollars and cents? What does that mean to us in our service of God? That just means very simply, the whole idea of building up the kingdom of God here is through, in general chain of creation, it's affected through the human being serving God and fulfilling the Torah and its mitzvahs. And generally speaking, this is divided up into the three pillars, upon which the three things, upon which the world stands, and it exists. Two different passages in Pirkei Avos, Torah and serving God, prayer and benevolence, which are in the chapter in the ethics of our fathers. Shalem Dim Shabbos. So we start reading Pirkei Avos this Shabbos. That's why Yehonasan gave the symbol specifically of 3 arrows, but Misper Gimel Davker, specifically 3 here. The Rebbe is answering the original question, not question, but pointing it out, the significance. Larames, Sheklolis, Binyan Malchus, Nifloi Deha Veda, Begimel Akavim. The Teira Veda Gimel Chasadim to allude to the fact and to hint to the fact that, generally speaking, to build the kingdom of God, this whole idea of the Malchus, and bring it about, this happens through serving God with the 3 pillars of Torah and prayer and benevolence. Now we'll know why there's a symbol here of arrows. This whole idea of refining the 10 Zayin Malchin, the 7 kings of Toyu, and bringing down the 9 spheres, because that also includes the intellectual spheres of Chachma Bina Das, and bring it all into Malchus, which means to permeate the earth with everything, to have it pervade. That's the idea of the conquering of the land of Israel in the spiritual sense, meaning to say we all have our own little Israel, and it's like we're going out for the first time. As is known, the idea of the conquering of the land of Israel in the spiritual sense is that we affect in the land of Canaan. We all have a land of Canaan, right? That it should become the land. Why is land called land in Hebrew? Eretz Sharatzasa, that it wanted or it ran. It's the same word, to do the will of its creator, and that's the same root as the word Eretz, Rutz, to run, or Rotzet, to want. That's also not a complete change, something new. Again, it's just uncovering that which you already have. It's revealing something which is hidden. Instead of the will being that it should be like Canaan, here the Rebbe doesn't go into it a lot, but Canaan is also the idea of peddling and not organized, whatever it may be, whatever is represented by that, and make it the will to do the will of God. And he brings the Rebbe Menachem again, bring this in the mind of that which the sages say, and it's brought in the Rambam, the beginning of the laws of the kings and their wars. The Jewish people were commanded 3 commandments when they entered the land of Israel. These 3, they had to wait till they come to Israel to appoint for them a king, and to cut out the seed, the descendants of Amalek, and to build for them the house that God chose, the holy temple. These 3 mitzvahs are also that we can have in the way we serve God in conquering the land in a spiritual sense. And what does this mean in our day-to-day life? Here's the 3 mitzvahs that ever goes through it, just in a short, concise way. The Gimel Aleph, the first one of these 3 things, Minei Melech, Shehu Binyan Malchus, the idea of appointing the king, meaning that to bring the dominion of God. The idea of Malchus, bring all the spheres and serving God with it. Beis Kisizera Amalek, and to cut out the descendants, the offspring of Amalek, who in That's the idea of God, the fulfillment of the prophecy, to remove the spirit of impurity from earth. God says He's going to do that, and we have to do our measure in that. Gimel, the third one, Binyan Beis Abchira, to build the God's chosen home, the temple. Shuhu closed in Nasidis Bais with Diddlis Baruch Tachtenim. We each have to make a home and a dwelling for God here in the lowest realm, the lowest part of the world. And he explains that Melech Harishan. Now the Rebbe says something very interesting, and this is what the Rebbe Menachem says there in the Maimer. The first king of Israel, after they went into the land of Israel, was Saul, King Saul, Shaul. Now it says here, the word nimshach here means like it's spelled like he was drawn, And the truth is, he was drawn into the kingdom. But I think it may be a typo, and it should say maybe nimshach, meaning anointed, and that would be with a ches and not a final chaf. With the oil through Shmuel, v'nikra Mashiach Hashem, and he's called the anointed one of God. So certainly that's what it should be. So that was the first king, and this was the question that Yehonasan was asking, that he was inquiring about. Listen to this. He wanted to know from his father, the king, how will the refinement of a Molech, how will that work, and how will that be sustainable? So therefore he tells David, tomorrow is going to be Rosh Chodesh, and you'll be remembered. And then I will know how the thing will go down. How is this matter? And I will tell you. No, that if King Saul already finished everything, all his refinement and everything to refine the world, and the world is already ready for the coming of Mashiach, he'll tell David, now it's time for you to come. You come here because the world's ready for Mashiach. Mashiach is going to come from David. David, the Malka Mashiach. David is the king of Mashiach. Now here it's again written with the long chaf, but it should of course be with the with a ches. So he was also anointed. It says with the horn, meaning it held the oil in it, and they poured the oil out of the horn. His reign will be an eternal reign, and which is till the reign of Mashiach, the son of David. And if this refinement hasn't ended, it's not finished, he'll tell David, no, the time didn't come for you to come yet. That's why he gave the symbol from 3 arrows. He says that if I tell the lad the arrows are from where you are and closer to here, then David can come. Pirush, if the arrows, which symbolize refinement of what's from the chaotic world of Tohu, that it's far away, like we said, if it's in a place where you could reach it, that means that we already finished refining everything. We just have to collect it and gather it. That's all that's left. This means he tells the lad to collect the arrows. Then David can come. Behold, the arrows are from you, and further, so and we didn't get to the ultimate of the refinement. Go, because God has sent you. There's still more work to be done. God has sent you. David has to continue this work in refining the world. The Rebbe says the reason that the exile and the time that we have to refine the world has been stretched out so long, the Mashiach didn't come yet. Look what the Rebbe says. We could possibly say, it's understood also according to what is brought and explained at the end of this Haftarah. Each one, they cried on each other till David regained his composure, till David got, it says, Higdil. He was the bigger one of Vur Badrushim. The Maimorim explain David here symbolizes Malchus. Jonathan Yehonasan should have been the greater one. Nevertheless, Malchus was the one that got the composure. It was grow bigger. Yehonasan is the first six fittest, the male, so to speak. Nevertheless, David is specifically the one who regained his composure, and he was greater at this point. Because, like we've said, there is an advantage of Malchus over the female Sphira, over the male, over the six. Because the Malchus goes down further and is able to refine. It pervades. It brings everything into the world. It's the practical one. And like we've said, and Kabbalistically it's explained, and this is in Proverbs, its feet fall, go down. It's, so to speak, to bring it down to the next level. And this descension is for the purpose of an ascension. And this descension specifically is what brings David to the ascension of the regaining his composure, of being greater. Like David also brought this into Yehonasan, who would have been the greater one. The Malchus is bringing you back into the Sfiris. Like it says when Mashiach comes, that the woman of valor will be the crown of her husband, so to speak. That Malchus will then be the crown over, and even though it's the receptacle, but it'll be all encompassing of the male, so to speak. That's the whole idea of the Golos taking so long to bring about that David should become the greater one, but Tachas Hashlem is the ultimate. And then the reason that this whole idea of bringing it all together, that tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh and you will be remembered, and this whole idea of the union of the sun and the moon, that is specifically through Yehonasan. It's explained in the Mamorim, Shehu Mishum, Yehonasan Meram the Shem Havaya. It's because Yehonasan alludes to the name of God. Bapashtas Pirish Hashem Yehonasan, in a very simple way. The name Yehonasan is Yud Hey Vav, the first three letters of God's name. Nosan, Havaya Nosan, gave, God gave. In order for there to be this building of the dominion of the Malchus, which is the idea of David, he has to have within him, drawn into him from this idea of God's name, Shem Havaya. So it's explained there again. We all understand this is what the Rebbe Marash brings in the Maimer, Mitshuvas Trumas Hadeshen. This is more on a halachic book called Trumas Hadeshen, which Shekosav, B'Yishem Yehonasan, Gab Dinik Ksivish, regarding the name Yehonasan. Yehonasan is the same name as Yonasan. Sometimes pronounced Yehonasan with a hey and sometimes without a hey. So there it's a discussion if somebody's name is Yehonasan, wrote Yonasan, or vice versa, etc., and how it has to be written in a marriage document, and how it's to be signed in any document, etc., and whatever. So it's a halachic discussion. And this is what he says. So the Marash quotes him, I noticed in the book of Samuel regarding the name Yehonasan ben Shaul, regarding Jonathan the son of Saul, from when he made the bond with David, his name is now then always written Yehonasan with a A, and before that, in most of the places, Nichtav Yonasan. It's written Yonasan without the Hey in most of the places. So this is from that halachic response. Albeit in yourself as Hey, so what does it mean that he has an additional Hey, Yehonasan in the name Yehonasan? And after the bond with David, after this covenant, the Marash explains, first he explains, well, what is this whole idea of an additional hay anyway? I mean, we know that Joseph also had an additional hay. Which, by the way, the Rebbe says, Yosef is the name of the Rebbe of the generation, of the Rebbe's Rebbe, which was the previous Rebbe. It says in a verse which is talking about Rosh Hashanah, the 81st chapter of Tehillim. Yom Binyan HaMalchus, which is when we build the kingdom. There it says, and we say this in the Shir Shal Yom also, Eidus B'Hoisef Somoy. That the testimony was placed into Joseph, but there it says it like that with a hey, Yehoisef. Rosh Hashanah Yotze Yosef B'Sev Surim. In Rosh Hashanah, Joseph left jail, prison, incarceration. And he also brings that which the sages teach us. The Gemara there in Soita, we're going to learn in a few weeks, says that when he had the hey added to his name, that gave him the capability and ability to learn all 70 languages, which he learned. The Rabbi Menachem explains the Yosef, who bechinas hey law. The hey that's added onto Yosef is the supernal hey, bechinas bina, that symbolizes understanding. It's hey has dimension. The yud only is the point. Hey has the dimension, so that's the idea of understanding. The broadening, that whole idea of the broadening out of leif and shalvana to be able to understand and grasp it. That's why through the adding of the hey in his name, Joseph was able to learn the 70 languages. Why did he need to know the 70 languages? So that he should be able to refine the world, which the 70 languages represents all 70 nations of the world. In the whole world, regarding Joseph, it says, Pharaoh said, besides you, no man will lift his hand or his foot, meaning you'll be in charge, you're the boss. This is what was said by Pharaoh, who was the leader of the whole world. In all-encompassing fashion. Therefore, Joseph ruled the whole world. In all 70 nations. And therefore he learned the 70 languages. So that he should be able to command every nation in their language. They shouldn't do anything, they shouldn't lift up their hand or their foot without him, without doing it the way he wants. This power comes to Yosef from the supernal hay, from the higher hay of God's name, so to speak. Oh, and Abraham also had the hay added. That's right. Here it is. Right after he had his bris, God added him the hay to his name, the covenant. Then it says, when God says you'll also be a father of many nations, and that's the hey of hamoin, of many. It's the first two letters of that word, of nations. They should be able to affect the whole world. Like the Alter Rebbe explains also in Tereh. Also the hay of Yonasan was also the supernal hay of understanding. Yonasan also has the hay also symbolizes the lower hay. Now the Rebbe is going to say a few Kabbalistic interesting things, and some of this actually the Rebbe discusses. He doesn't quote his father specifically, but the Rebbe's father does talk about some of these things, and the Rebbe also expounds on this elsewhere. Kavur b'Kabbalah, like it's explained in the Kabbalah, Shenosan, Shebeshem Yehonasan, the name Nosan, which is the Nun Tov Nun, which is part of the name Yehonasan, who bechinas heitato b'Hakor. That's the same idea as the lower hay. In Hakor literally means the hitting, but it's what we would call somehow multiplication. And so Hainu Hey Yud Pamim Yud, 5 times 10 times 10, which is 500, right? 5 times 10 is 50. 50 times 10 is 500. So Nasan is also 50 plus 400 plus 50 equals 500. So they equal the same. Shleim is the Ois Hey Tato. That would be the ultimate of the lower hay. Right, because the ultimate of it is something with 10 and 10 of the 10. So 5 times 10 times 10. But wait a minute, it could also be written without the hay, just Yonasan. It's missing the supernal hay, and the lower hay is hidden. It is It is okay. Let's just say it's concealed. Ki ik Hashem Havaya Heim Ha'osis Yud Vav, because the main letters of God's name is the Yud of the Vav. Sheheim Duchrim, that's considered the male letters. Shenki Beis Hain Beis Nukvim, the Hey is considered the female letters. Ve'einer and Ikra Hashem, they're not the main part of the name. This is all based on the Zohar. V'yesh Akash Zeh Gam Tziruf Shem Havaya Meir B'Chedesh Iyar. There's an interesting thing that Rebbe brings here parenthetically, that this could also be connected with the combination of the name of God. We had this about a month ago in the Vayomer also, that every month the 4 letters of God's name could be in a different combination. There's more combinations than that, but there's just the combinations the way it is in a month. And remember, we also said that because of there's a double letter, so then there would be 12 combinations in that sense. So the combination of the month of Iyar, Shahud Rosh Chodesh Shalal Pasuk, each one of them also has, in the month of Iyar, it's Yud Hey Hey Yud Vav. So that's an acronym of the verse, Yishalal HaMishalal Haskell Yudea. That it's the verse in Jeremiah that the one who is means praising, bragging, but praising, and should understand and know. In this combination, the beginning and the end are the male letters, the Yud and the Vav, Duchrin. For Oisis, Hey, Ilov, at the time, the 2 Heys, the supernal and the lower, are in the middle, between the Yud and the Vav. It says, David, Im Yehonasan Hu, Boy, Ois Hey Rishona. And so what is accomplished here, after David and Jonathan did they had the covenant, so that that he got the hay, he got the upper hay. Hay the supernal hay. This is the broad of the understanding, like we mentioned. Therefore, for the kingdom to be built, that's the idea of David. You have to bring a line drawn down. Kav, what is that letter? The Vav. And from this Yehonasan, Shem Havaya, and that's, which is also the God's name. That's the idea that David regained his composure. He was greater. He got big. David Yehonasan, David was able to bring this ultimate way of it being in Yehonasan itself. So from bottom up, so to speak, to explain this even more detailed, the Rebbe says like this: David alludes to and hints at the idea of Malchus, this lowest sphere, the kingdom. David, but wait a minute, what do we have? How is David's name spelled? Dalet, Vav, Dalet, 2 Dalets, Ube'emtza, Vav, Machabram, and the Vav that connects them. That these 2 daleds are also like the hay, the upper and the supernal hay, and the lower hay. But wait a minute, it's a hay without the little foot. That makes up a dalet. So in this malchus idea, the hay becomes a dalet. The Rabbi Menachem explains what that's about, because the idea of dalet is poverty. The Indian dalus umiloshin dalus. The word dalit comes from the idea of dalus, which means poverty. That symbolizes the dissension. Just like we said, in the idea of malchus, its feet go down, so it's able to give more. So we don't see the hay, that's the idea of the dalit. This dissension is for the purpose of the ascension. It'll go up even higher. Like it also says, like it says in Isaiah 38, uplift your eyes upward, because they weaken them from looking here, make them focus them upward. The modern that's the highest, the loftiest. loftiest level. That's the idea of the crown. Like we mentioned earlier, till David is the one who regains the composure. And it's even higher. So this descension was for the ascension. A lot of topics here. Yeah, a lot of Kabbalistic stuff, but the bottom line is we have to all get it together. It's the idea of Rosh Chodesh, to reinvigorate ourselves and to energize ourselves. This is the idea of, and Jonathan said tomorrow is going to be Rosh Chodesh, and you will be remembered because your place will be empty. The idea of it through submission, through nullification, through the being dissipated. Your place will be remembered, like the earth dissipates because the other things aren't there. The whole existence, your makeup isn't there, and your existence is nullified because you understand that you're part of the greater existence of God. Well, even if kata, then when you're able to draw down, become submitted within God, and then you're able to draw down from the loftiest levels of godliness, and then you are remembered. Being remembered from the loftiest levels. This brings about the true union of the sun and the moon. The moon being renewed, the renewal of the moon was at Peil Gam Yisrael. This affects Israel. That they are in the future to be renewed like the moon, like we say in Kiddush Lavona from the Gemara and Sanhedrin. From like the Chazal, like the sages tell us. To the extent that we say David was greater. Nowadays, actually, so immediately there will be redeemed. But the true full redemption through our righteous Mashiach, King David the Mashiach, Chaim l'chaim.